Hello all, I'm super excited to have with me today Igor Tsyganskiy, Chief Technology Officer at Bridgewater Associates, one of the largest asset management firms in the world and known to be also one of the most sophisticated and advanced in technology. Igor, the largest software companies like Microsoft and Amazon are following your guidance. And I remember clearly from my time at Microsoft that every email from your team always became a guiding principle. So thank you again for taking the time and joining me for this fireside chat.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Just as a starter, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your role, and how you are using cloud today?
So I run technology at Bridgewater Associates. We're the largest hedge fund in the world, and we have very large compute infrastructure. So my responsibilities include everything from running our data centers, software in our data centers, all the investment systems, and being responsible for our investment platforms that focus on identifying and understanding how the world works, creating opportunities that we then trade on, and all the appropriate trading systems. Everything from the architecture of those systems all the way to the operation of them. Given the fact that our customers are mostly institutional investors, state-owned funds, pension funds, we have a huge responsibility in front of them to keep everything that we do secure. Given the fact that we're a systematic fund, and what that means is that all of our trading, all of our ideas, we persist them in software systems, and then we use software systems to trade the market. So we have quite a big infrastructure that we use to trade the market. Our footprint is very large. We've been fortunate enough over the last 4 to 5 years to move most of our footprint into the cloud. And we use both Azure and AWS to operate the fund.
We are here today to talk about the Log4J vulnerability and the crisis it created. And maybe we should start by first, how did you hear first about this vulnerability, and what was your initial reaction?
Well, I first heard it from reading an alert about it. And my reaction was mostly, wow. On the team, we went back and forth inside of the team. So, okay, that looks pretty big. That was, I think, sometimes last week. So that was about 7 days ago. It's that's exactly what we need before the holiday season.
Exactly, and I think NIST gave it a score of a 10 out of a 10. US officials are saying this is the most serious flaw ever seen. And when we chatted before this conversation, you called it digital COVID. And maybe you can share your perspective about why is it such a crisis today?
Right. Well, I'm saying that it can have a potential to be a digital COVID. And the way I describe it is, imagine that all the interconnected computers in the world, and now we're learning even some on Mars, computers, servers, devices. Imagine that all these are just houses and those houses have windows and doors on them. And then one day someone comes in, does something like this, and says there's no more locks on any doors or windows. Oh, and by the way, you don't know how many doors and windows you have in your home. So that's the way I would basically describe what has happened. Now, since someone just clicked and, made the whole cyber world not as secure as it used to be, then the second question comes up. Well, what does that mean? And so then the question is, you have people who may attack you or enter your home without knocking, right? Just enter the home. And then you kind of need to go out and discover everywhere where you have doors and windows and put locks on them. And so the question becomes, what can happen faster? Can you discover where your doors and windows are and put the locks in faster than someone will walk into those open doors? So the reason I'm saying that it has the potential to be a digital COVID is mostly because the time it takes to attack someone is asymmetrical to the time it takes to protect. And attacking is a lot easier given this vulnerability than protecting, discovering of what you need to protect. And therefore, attacks can spread very, very fast. And if they spread fast, bad guys can have access to too many resources all at the same time, and then the whole system becomes just really, really fragile.
This is exactly, I think, what we talked. So around one, it's a very pervasive use of the library. It's everywhere. Right. And the second, it's really easy to exploit it. Yes. And now we're basically going to see attackers using it to target different systems in specific campaigns. And the question is, first, how do we detect all of these systems? How do we identify all of these systems across all of the environment? I read today in the news that even NASA's Mars helicopter is vulnerable to the Log4j. So basically, how do we identify all of these systems across the state in the most rapid way?
Well, the reason I'm here is because I'm grateful for the partnership that we have between the two companies and being able to use your software to quickly identify the places where we may have, or actually where we have a problem. And we were able to use Wiz. I reached out when this happened a couple of days ago. So we became a Wiz customer. When was it? In November? I think in November. And I would say, signed a pretty big deal with you guys. And I reached out to the CEO of your company. I said, hey, you just paid for the whole deal in 1 week. And the reason I said that was because by using your software, we were able to identify the places where we can find vulnerabilities extremely fast so we can patch it, right? So you can get an inventory of all those doors and windows. So generally speaking, we're very fortunate that large portions of our infrastructure are running in the cloud. And given the fact that they're running in the cloud, both in AWS and Azure, you have cloud native software that we were able to use. And maybe it's serendipity, not in a great way, but this is what your software was designed to deal with. And so, static analysis and dependency analysis across vast number of computers, trying to figure out, producing a dependency graph and security graph, trying to figure out where you might have issues. Once you know where you have issues, then patching it is not actually as hard as just knowing where they are. So we used Wiz, and after going through the whole experience and actually focusing on fixing the problem, I agreed to do this podcast as a big thank you for the partnership.
Thank you very much, Igor. I truly appreciate it. And I'm so happy to hear that this was so helpful. Maybe this is in striking difference to what we have in the on-prem world, right? Where it's very hard to get immediate view or even to endpoints and other devices that don't have cloud.
Well, yes, I am hopeful that tools like yours, that you will have support for VMware soon, and you will be able to do the similar dependency analysis in the static world of on-premise, where you still deal with images. Is it correct that you're working on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be, I think.
Now I'm going to just interview you.
Uniform view across any type of cloud. I think the cloud offers a really unique opportunity to have visibility into what's going on much faster than what we had in siloed machines and devices.
Well, that's right. And then, that goes to the benefit of both AWS and Microsoft. The power of the cloud and other providers, we just happen to use those two. The power of the cloud allows you to act a lot quicker on some of these issues across the board. But I hope that the solutions will emerge for on-premise as well. The on-premise work is harder across the board, and that in itself is what I'm mostly fearful of on behalf of what is happening across the enterprises around the world.
So, what are maybe the most, I think, the biggest misconceptions or the mistakes that you have the opportunity to provide your point of view to security leadership that is now watching us? What are the things that they should be mindful of when they try to tackle this Log4j crisis?
What we've discovered, and we have a pretty tight environment, is the whatever our exposure we thought our exposure is was probably 1/10 of what our exposure ended up being, and knowing that quickly was the game changer. So that's mostly what I'm worried about. The reason I'm somewhat relaxed is because we did scan everything, we did use your tool, and we've discovered that our footprint is way bigger than we thought it is. Right? Mostly not just because of the software that we've written, but the third-party software that we use, and knowing how all that interconnects and how that basically may have exposure to the external services, and basically being able to look at the whole security graph and see the dependencies, see the trees, and see the exploits that someone might take, and trying to close that down really quickly.
Yeah, so it's actually one is a discovery of every instance of the Log4j, then also the ability to maybe see it in the context of what should be fixed first and how to prioritize it, what is externally facing, what is like high privileges, and then like closing it one by one. But what you point out is that basically the long tail of systems that we are not aware that they are vulnerable, this is what's going to haunt us for.
Well, I worry about two things. One thing, I'm going to be working over the next few weeks to bring the whole industry together, because I don't think you just may be able to help by yourself. One of the aspects of having open source software is people reuse the libraries, which is what's happening here. And then the second thing is very frequently people cut and paste the source code.
Oh.
Right? And they put it into their systems. And knowing that exposure, since the component is so widely used, I don't know, that's going to be pretty hard.
So we're going to see variations or the same.
I mean, what do you think? You're also in security. I think that there's going to be a lot of variations. And basically, that's where the industry needs to come together to help the rest of the world deal with the issue.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that from our experience with vulnerabilities, usually when there is like a high profile vulnerability in one area, it shines it. And then we know how to patch it, but also others are looking for other vulnerabilities in this area, and it becomes like a hotspot. And I think this is exactly what we're going to see across copy-pasted code, across the same libraries, versions, and because it is so pervasive, I think this is what's going to really change the way we do security. I think that the ability to really identify and remediate such systems in the most shortest time before an attacker can get to it, I think that's what's going to be the measuring factor for the industry in the upcoming months, because the vulnerability is so easy to exploit. You log everything, and you basically change a user agent, and that's it. You're logging a user agent, and you can run code.
It's important to mention that the component has been in existence since 2013. So this is not a new vulnerability. It's a new vulnerability that has been made public recently. And the danger is not the fact, in some ways, maybe some state-owned actors may not have known about this, but I'm pretty sure one way or the other, state-owned actors across the globe, you can assume that they had an idea about it, right? The danger here is it's so simple that a kid, everyone from a state-owned player all the way down to a 13-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid who just wants to go out and play can go out and take over it's a server. You need to go cut and paste the code. There's plenty of libraries that are available, and you can mount your own attack. And, this does not need to be some country that we're afraid of. It might just be a middle schooler who is just exploiting something and accidentally does something wrong. And then you say that you can go from middle schooler to people who are just adversarially want to do stupid things to professional criminals to state-owned actors. The number of these people is so hard and so large that creates the fragility. And that's what I'm mostly fearful of, right? That it's just basically an ecosystem. It's like instead of mining Bitcoin, you're going to go mine this and, maybe you'll get some money.
So like the World Economic Forum already put cyber security as a second most serious threat to our existence after global warming, of course, or climate change. But basically, I think that this actually accelerates it. And as an industry, so we've covered already two things that we have to do. One, we mustn't assume that we have identified all of the instances because we had one tool that told us we are good. We basically need to now think about it again and again. Every time we ship, every time we deliver, identify like how we're using that component and make sure we replace it and patch it. That's one. Second, we need to go and find any instance that might have proliferated through code into other systems so we can identify all of the impacted components for real. And third, we need to be able now to monitor what threat actors are doing so we know where do we need to be quicker. So what exploits are available. What other type of measures or security controls should we put in place beside patching when we think about countering this?
So, just to answer this question and build on the question you had before, well, what we've done is we moved in, as you might know, we worked a lot with Microsoft to move into the notion of zero trust networking environment, right? Where your assumption of what you trust and what you do not trust is very different. The second thing is what you're talking about is what does it mean to have a production environment from the security standpoint of view? What does it mean to do pen testing? What does it mean to do red teaming? What does it mean to deploy software? And how do you assess risk? So the way I'd like to think about it is, to build on your previous question, I call it continuous risk assessment. Continuous risk assessment is essentially where you guys sit. The risk is changing every day. And you need tools to basically assess your risk and adjust. The risk is not static. Since the risk is not static, you have to constantly monitor for shape of risk to change. And for that, you need tools and you need development techniques. And I believe you're on the forefront of that particular thing. So between zero trust, modernization of your environments, there's continuous risk assessment. All those things need to be done at the same time. In addition to that, it's very important, in my belief, is people who are building mission critical applications. There are no shortcuts. One of the benefits of commercial software is that someone takes responsibility for commercial software. The shortcut with open source software, it's great and it gets fixed over time. But what we're seeing now is one of the shortfalls of open source software where it's so widely used, yet no one is responsible. If it would be a commercial piece of software, at least you can call someone. You can call Microsoft, you can call AWS, you can call Google, you can call Oracle. There's someone to call and they can patch it. In here, it's free, great. Everyone deployed it. It works great, but these are the benefits. And then the downside is the fact that someone has to be able to then fix it and maintain it over time.
So the security risk assessment you mentioned is the continuous risk assessment that you mentioned is actually based on the Wiz graph that takes into account all of the environmental context such as permissions, the network exposure, the vulnerabilities, the importance of the workload, the deployed, and basically correlates it all of the time. So you have like a prioritized risk. This is a machine that is internet facing and vulnerable and has admin permissions. Obviously, you need to identify it and tackle it first before you go to the siloed machine that is doesn't have any permissions anyway. So basically creating this continuous risk assessment, identifying like what are the key elements. If you have 1 hour to do security, how do you become most effective, and doing it continuously every day because the environment is so dynamic. This is like the third element you discussed. And I think that it actually gives a good segue. I think last year, ironically, same period, it was SolarWinds, and all of the learnings we had over the past year from SolarWinds. And I think you touched on it, but when you try to fast forward a year from today, what would have been like the learnings we can start having from this Log4j vulnerability?
Yeah. Well, and I just want to highlight that the vulnerability we had last year was a state-sponsored attack, very, very sophisticated and very targeted. And in that sense, yes, the downside is that there's an attack. The upside is at least there's someone to negotiate with. In here, there's no one to negotiate with. So as we're going to look into, a year later, my belief is that we're living in an extremely interconnected world. The interconnectedness of, people talk about the thing that software is eating the world. And as software is eating the world, hey, software is buggy. And not all the software is secure. And so that means the world is going to be buggy. And the world is not going to be as secure. Third very important thing, Moore's law, essentially everything gets more and more efficient over time. So the world is getting more efficient. And that means also the attackers are getting more efficient. And the speed with which attackers, we need to protect against all the attackers in the world. But one attacker, the one guy and one girl, they can go and do whatever they want to do. And so if they're getting more and more efficient, this interconnected world, as it changes over and over and over again, the asymmetry of it, I think that over the next year and the years to come, people will realize that there's no more separation between cyber threats and global threats. And those two things are combined into one. That it's just basically a threat assessment and cyber risk is equal to real risk. We went from malware to ransomware to now killware. If someone takes over the hospital, and that has happened multiple times this year when during the pandemic, whoever is taking over the hospital, and whether they know it or not, that leads to people dying, right? Because, pharmacy is not working, some digital equipment is not working because the networks are offline. That's an example of killware. And so basically, I think it's a loss of innocence. That's the best way I can describe it. There will need to be a lot more security assessment, especially around mission critical applications across the world.
No, it's a really powerful statement, and I completely agree with that direction. Loss of innocence is a good way to say that. I think we looked at security for a long time as something that goes after the fact. And now we came to realization that security has to be by design, by the way we build the stuff, not only by design, by the way we build it, but also by the way that we respond to it fast enough. It's a necessity that we have to build this muscle. And again, as a community, because as you've seen, it's the dependency, the interconnectedness will become a challenge.
Yeah, and it definitely both takes a village, and because the world isn't connected, the nature of security tools cannot be isolationist. It's not enough to just secure yourself. You have to secure others. Just because my software is running in any cloud, whether it's Microsoft Cloud, Google Cloud, AWS Cloud, or in the data center, if my software is secure, it's not enough. All the other software around me has to be secure, and that software might not be something that's produced by me or even used by me, right? So, which comes back to that notion of which I think you guys are pushing on and pioneering, which is security graph is everything.
Yes. Security graph includes also the components that you rely on and what's their security posture, right? And if you have a vendor ecosystem that connects to your environment, you basically need to be aware of it and analyze it as well. So I think it all goes to maybe the security graph is a response when you think about how security responds to the interconnectedness. When we think about the word as graphs and connections between elements, then we are able to basically bring it together and assess the risk in a more, let's say, symmetric way to how attackers are thinking, right?
Yes, and you asked me. I just thought about another thing. You asked me, what do I think will happen? One of the reasons I'm excited about your company, and that's what is being showcased right now, is I believe that the same impact social graph had on a bunch of industries, whether it's advertising or a bunch of others, security graph is going to be having a huge impact on the world. And a company who owns the largest security graph will end up having quite a lot of leverage and ability to help its customers deals with upcoming threats. And from everything I'm seeing, you're the closest. I mean, that's what you've been guys thinking about it for a long time. You have the best implementation of that so far.
How much time did it take you to deploy Wiz across your entire environment?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Under threat, it took us hours to deploy Wiz, right?
Hours.
Yes,
So it's
that's
feasible.
why I'm saying you've paid for yourself in a matter of 1 week, paid for 5 years subscription to Wiz, right? So 1 week, because we were able from the time that the risk got identified to the time when we could assess the impact of the risk on our organization took 2 or 3 days. And last year, it would have, I don't know, last year, given on what we knew, it would have been unknown. It would have been infinite. We would have closed 15% of what we've learned we have, right? So that, and the rest of it, like if you don't know where your threat is, if you don't know where your doors are, the only time you find out is by doing different types of scans. Like it would be a while. And that while grows proportionally with the size of the environment that you have. And so it was very fast to bring it up. We were fortunate enough that we were doing pen testing on your environment right prior to this. So we spent the whole month pen testing your environment and making sure that it's actually secure to let you scan our stuff. And so we just came to the point where your pen test got cleared. We worked everything out. So then we could actually use the software. And from use to result, it was minutes to days because we were deploying it. Now, what we did is we accelerated deployment. And deployment was very, very fast. And in some ways, it was fast for both multi-tenant deployment on those instances where we do not think that we need the security to be at the highest level, and the on-premise deployment where we did need, well, we don't need to call it on-premise, but basically Bridgewater own deployment, where we don't want anyone else to see what is happening. So, the fastest deployment to value that I've seen, period, especially during the crisis.
And we are seeing already that it's being used in numerous campaigns, in ransomware, in deploying malware, installing backdoors. And yeah, I think this is like the challenge. How do we keep our ears open and respond the fastest possible to the risk we identify? And right. Igor, maybe just in general, to any final, as we wrap this session, any final thoughts that you would like to share or guidance you would like to give to other security leaders countering this?
Yes, I mean, I'm going to do that publicly outside of this forecast. I haven't been able to find another tool. If you're deployed in the cloud right now and you need to close down your issues, go talk to Wiz. And this is not a paid promotion. I'm mostly saying this because they have helped me and I have not seen anything else right now that can give you as big of an impact. And that's why I agreed to do this podcast, mostly to give you guys enough credibility, in the most efficient, fastest way for people who are searching on how to solve that problem to know where the solution might be. And we're not getting anything out of it, but my advice is if you're dealing with this problem and you have currently been running software in the cloud or services in the cloud and you need to assess your risk, Wiz will probably get you there faster than anyone else.
Thank you so much, Igor, and for joining us and sharing your views on the threat landscape and where we are heading. And also I want to take this opportunity to wish all the teams out there, the responders and the security teams, the fastest path to remediating this vulnerability. And I hope that this won't evolve to be a long-lasting crisis that we will need to face.